Hey everyone, Twisted here. So this is part 5. We're going to start getting into the more advanced stuff this go around. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to show you how to put a model on top of a background. And we're not going to use the erase tool, and we're not going to use the polygonal lasso tool. We are going to use a mask, and instead of cutting the model out of the background, we're going to cut the background on top of the model. So let's get started. What I did here was I found this model. I thought she was adorable. She's on a white background. So what I did was I matched that by using my Dopper tool. And if you take your Dopper tool, which looks like I guess a Dopper, an eyedropper, and you put it anywhere, it will match the color. It's just pulling the color. So it gets down to like 1 pixel and it will match the color, at least as close to what it will take. So I matched the color because this isn't completely white. This is more of a grayish color. And if we look in here, it's a sea color. So we went more closer to her body where it's going to match it the best. And we matched up the background. Here I just found a stock image, and if you can see, I cut off the bottom of her feet. I don't like the model to be standing right on top of the background, and the reason why I don't like doing that is because a lot of the backgrounds that you choose, if there is no shadow, it's going to look like that model is floating, and we don't want her to look like she's floating. We want her to actually look like that she's meant to be there. So cutting off the bottom of her feet is going to acquire the look that we're looking for. So I'm going to turn on this layer, and by doing that, right on the side panel right here are little squares. And if you see the eye, that means it's visible. If you click it again, it hides the layer. So we're going to find a blending mode that is going to match. And what I mean by that is that we want to see the model come through. Multiply I found to be the best. Hard light makes it a little too bright because of the white background. So what we're going to do is we're going to go with multiply, which keeps it more of the same tones as it was. Now down here on this bottom toolbar right here, you're going to have a few different tools. You have your FX tool, and that's to style the layer. You're going to have a mask tool, which is like a little rectangle with a dot in the middle. You're going to have an adjustments layer, which is a circle that's got half light gray and half dark gray. You're going to have a group folder. You're going to have a new layer, which looks like a piece of paper with a folded edge. And you're going to have a delete layer, which just looks like a trash can. So we're going to come down here and we're going to add a mask to that background. Next, we're going to go to our zoom button, which looks like a magnifying glass, and we're going to zoom her up as much as possible. After that, we're going to go over here to our paintbrush, and we're going to go and we're going to make sure that our hardness is at 100, and we're going to find a fairly small brush. Anything too large, anything higher than 35 pixels, it's going to be too much, and it's going to get around the edges, and that's what we don't want. I usually work with my opacity about 35% on my brush and my flow at 91%. And the reason why I do that is because too high of a flow is going to go outside the edges every time you make a mouse click, and too low of a flow is just going to be like a little dot. So we don't want to do either of that. We just want to make sure that our opacity is down low a little bit as well, just in case you go over. And really, in masking, it doesn't matter. So, I mean, we can work with a higher opacity, which is fine, and we'll do at this moment. We're going to make sure that our spacing is down to 1% because we don't want any jagged edges. Now, with our mask clicked, and you're going to see this white piece of paper, and we're going to look for black paint. And the reason for this is anything you paint inside of this layer right now with this mask selected is going to delete. So as you can see, you're going to see your model start to shine through. Now that's what we're looking for. And what we're doing is we are just a lot of people who use Photoshop, they call it masking out. So all we're doing is we're painting on top of her, and not on the layer itself, but on this mask right here. We're painting on top of that with black paint. Now, you're going to start seeing white edges, and if you do see those, that's okay. Don't worry about them so much, because we're going to go back through and we're going to clean those up fairly quickly. So don't worry about your side edges. Now, I am going to explain as to why I use a lower opacity though. You see over here, we're going to have like some straggly hairs. And the reason why I work with a lower opacity, let's first grab some white paint and we're going to paint back over on the edge of her hair. So we've got some straggly hairs right there. If we lower the opacity down, grab some black paint, and start to just click over that, it's not going to look so harsh. Like you're not taking away most of the background around her hair, because it's going to lower the opacity of the paint that you're using. So you can go over this edge, and like I said, you can see that white edge, and that's okay. Don't worry about them so much. Well, up the opacity again, and we'll start clicking around her some more. Start taking away that paint. Now, to get around some more of the edges, and we'll just skip over her shoulder a little bit in the beginning, but to get over her edges, just start going in with a smaller brush. Now to do that, you can go over here and just mess with the sizes, or in Photoshop, if you do the left bracket, it's going to make a smaller brush. You do the right bracket, it's going to make a larger brush. And this is in Windows. This is the hotkeys for the Windows to making a bigger or smaller brush. So, like I said, don't worry so much about the edges. You can, I mean, honestly, if all you want to do is just go ahead and get around her as much as possible, don't worry about the edges so much. Because like I said, we can go back in and clean those up fairly quickly and not have to worry about, you know, staying within the lines. At this point, all it is just to get a, it's just to figure out roughly where your model is. And a lot of times when you use a darker background, you could just lower the opacity, you know, of the layer itself and just mask out, and then up the opacity of the layer. Now the reason why I'm going fairly quickly is because I'm going to assume that you've already watched the other tutorials and you know pretty much all of the terms that I'm using at this point. And if you don't, then go ahead and go back through and watch, you know, tutorials 1 through 4, and that will give you a rough idea of what I'm talking about. All right. So here we have her masked out for the most part. We're going to go back through and we're going to grab a smaller brush. So left bracket, we're going to make a smaller brush. We're going to grab some white paint. And we're going to start just filling that back in with white. Just get around the edges of her hair, get around the edges of her body. I mean, I say we, but I mean me. We pretty much mapped her all the way out, so you know exactly where her lines are. And if you have to, go ahead and zoom right in. I mean, there is no restrictions as to where you need to be, and if you have to go back through, and believe me, I've done this so many times where I am just flip-flopping back and forth between white and black paint just so that way I can get her back to where she needs to be. And a lot of times, since I don't have a steady hand, I do not just start running my brush around, because then my hand starts to get really shaky and I'll end up going back over her, and it just takes more of a process. So I try to do as much as I can with doing just straight lines, or I just do a lot of clicking, which either way, however you feel comfortable in doing it, do so. So all we're doing is we're just following the set lines of her body as a guide. We're trying to fill in as much of that background as we can. I'm going to go ahead and take as much time as we need. With cutting out a model or cutting out the background, you're going to want to take your time with it. I mean, you want that model to look like it's meant to be there and not just floating on top of the background. So just keep following the lines of her. Okay, so now we've done masking out. Our next part of this tutorial, instead of using a mask, which we have a mask there, I don't know why we have it, but instead of using a mask, we're still going to be on multiply. And we are going to grab this color right here on normal, and it's going to be in the background. And it's probably going to be more of a white color. See, it's in that window. So we're going to grab our dauber. We're going to pull that color, go back to multiply, and this is where you're going to want to stay as close to the edges as you can. But as you start to paint around her with that color, it's going to start showing that through. Now this is exactly what we want. So stay as close to the edges as you can. We want to not get over the background, because if we do, or get over across her edges, if we do, we're going to start showing parts of her background, and we don't want to do that. Now you're probably asking yourself why we're doing this instead of masking out. Well, the reason for it is that it's going to help blend a lot better than just masking her out. So let's see. See her hand here and her hand here, it's brighter. Here it's a little darker. It's matching with the tones of the background. And that's the effect that we're going for, because that's going to help with your blending, going further on in the tutorials, and I start to show you how to use, your blending, your adjustment layers and whatnot. It's going to help with that type of blending a lot better than just masking her out. So we're going to continue to go through, and we're going to continue to paint over her. Now, with this, I'm going to say this, with painting her, I usually use a really low opacity brush, and the reason why I do that is because it helps when you get around the edges. If you have to go over it a couple of times, that's fine. But you're not making a complete and utter mistake when you go into a larger brush and you get over the edges. The paint isn't going to spill over. But you're going to have to go over like parts of her skin and her clothes a couple of times, which is fine. And I say this in my beginners tutorials, and I'm going to say this in my more advanced tutorials. Masking and painting over anything like this right here is the most time-consuming part of any avatar making, and I'm sure that, you know, if you're somebody just taking a refresher or seeing how somebody else builds, you're going to know that, and you're going to know that with your very first avatar, and you're trying to either cut the model out or you're going to paint. Now, see how I got some over the edge? That's not going to matter too much. So don't be too scared. I mean, try and be as accurate, as close to the edges as you can without going over, but don't be too scared, because anything can be fixed. Now you're asking yourself, well, why don't you just go back? Well, you can only go back so many steps. You want to know how to go back. The shortcut keys for that is Control Alt Z on Windows, and that will take you back a step. And you can hit that until you see right there, Control Alt Z. Now you want to be as conscious about it as you can, because Photoshop, like I've said in my beginners tutorials, Photoshop only lets you go back so many steps. I can't remember how many it is. It's been so long since I've really used the go back button, but I think it's about 20 steps, and each mouse click is considered a step. So be conscious to where you are. If you need to, lower the opacity of the layer right down, so that way you can see the edges as best as you can. And sure, you can't really tell where you're painting, but that's all right, because in the end, when you raise the opacity back up, you're going to see where you are on the spots that you missed, and you can get as close to the edges as you can. But this will at least give you some sort of guide telling you where you're at. So I fully suggest, you know, turn on some music, turn on your show, chat, whatever, and just continue to paint. And some people really like messy edges. I mean, they like when parts of the background goes on to the model. I honestly don't prefer that, and I'm not going to teach you that way, because I don't prefer to do it. And I know quite a few graphic makers that don't prefer to do it either. So we're going to raise the opacity back up, and we're going to continue to just paint her in. Let's see, we can look at her arm. I'm going to go back over that a couple of times. Probably need to go back up towards her head too. Go back over that a couple of times. So like I said, this is the most time consuming part. Some ways it can be therapeutic. I know it is for me. You just shut the brain off and meditate. All right, there you go. And that's with painting in. Looks a lot better than with masking out. And here is masking out. Here is painting in. See how it looks? Her skin is a lot paler with the masking out. Now let's change this. Mask out. Paint in. See how her skin is a little paler with the masking out than with the painting in? It blends her in a lot better with the painting in. So, like I said, I prefer that. I use it as much as possible. I use it where I can, especially with certain, certain backgrounds. Now, with all of that being said, let's go and try and find another background to place on top of that, because you, like I said in other tutorials, you are not limited to buy one model and one background. Blend, and try and find as many backgrounds as you like. You could go crazy with it. You can learn to make new backgrounds. You can, I'm just using just regular stock backgrounds that I've gotten off the internet and that I've collected over the years and all of that other good stuff. But try and find things that will go with the avatar. Like, let's pull this one out and see what this looks like. All right. There we go. We can go with screen on this, and then we can not take the same color. Screen, we need to go darker, so we're going to try and pull some of these darker colors. Let's see what this one looks like. Screen there. Now, because this one's considered the top layer, you don't have to be as, and I'll probably end up taking a softer brush, and then I will up the size, which is the right bracket, and I will just start going around her pretty roughly. Even lower the opacity on it a little bit. Lower the opacity right down, and then just start clicking over her. You know, you mostly just want to get her skin and the parts that are going to show too much. We don't want that. And there we go. So we're going to stop right there, guys, on this one. This was the tutorial on painting in and masking out, and our next tutorial I'm going to show you how to use certain filters. I'm basically treating this tutorial because many times I've been asked to make an avatar from start to finish. Well, I figured I'd break them up into pieces and use them as my advanced tutorial. Excuse me. And my more advanced tutorial. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this graphic right here, and we're going to go and we're going to make them from start to finish, and we're going to be using filters. We're going to make it how I personally make an avatar. And I will go ahead and I will leave this model, these backgrounds, for you to go ahead and to work with them, so that way you know how I'm going about this series. So I will see you guys in the next one, which will be filtering.